Ambassador Elias Carter had spent decades brokering fragile truces, balancing on the razor's edge between diplomacy and war. He had always believed that words could temper violence, that reason could prevail over brutality. But as he sat across from Lord Zelver in the gleaming, gold-lit chambers of the Imperial Senate, an unease coiled in his gut like a tightening vice. The Imperial representative, adorned in obsidian robes embroidered with the insignia of his house, exuded an air of casual disdain. His reptilian eyes, slitted and unblinking, held no warmth. He had listened to Carter's pleas for justice, for fair treatment of human colonies, with the patience of a predator watching prey exhaust itself before the killing blow. "You humans," Zelver murmured, his voice rich with condescension, "cling to this illusion that you are equals in the stars, that your words matter." His forked tongue flickered between his teeth. "But you misunderstand your place. You are tolerated, not respected." Carter swallowed his rising anger. He had been sent to negotiate trade rights, to ensure the sovereignty of Earth's outer colonies, to prevent another war. But now, beneath the senator's words, there was something else, a finality. The chamber doors slid open with a quiet hiss. An Imperial aide approached, whispering something into Zelver's ear. The alien's lip curled in amusement. Without a word, he lifted a sleek datapad from the table and turned it toward Carter. The screen flickered to life. The footage was grainy at first, the camera's signal struggling against interference, but as it cleared, the blood was unmistakable. Haven, for a peaceful human colony nestled in the outer rim, was burning. Carter barely registered the breath leaving his body. His hands gripped the edge of the table as the scene unfolded. Imperial soldiers, clad in black armor, moved through the settlement with methodical precision. Their plasma rifles flared, cutting down men and women as they fled. A child, no older than 6, sprinted into frame. A tiny figure, barefoot and terrified, his sobs audible even through the weak transmission. He ran toward a woman, arms outstretched. A mother. The shot was clean. One precise bolt to the chest, and she crumpled to the dirt. The boy stumbled, too shocked to scream. The soldier who fired did not hesitate. Another bolt. The child collapsed beside his mother, his small hands reaching but never touching. Carter's breath turned shallow. The camera feed continued, each second etching horror into his mind. Homes collapsed under orbital bombardments. Bodies lined the streets. The screams, "Dear God!" The screams, lingered even after the visuals blurred, the feed succumbing to static. Then silence. Zelver placed the datapad down with deliberate ease, as though he had merely shown Carter the latest economic projections. That, he said, is what happens when lesser beings demand what is not theirs. Carter did not move. His heart pounded a brutal rhythm against his ribs, his pulse deafening in his ears. This was not an act of war. War had rules. This was extermination. He forced himself to meet Zelver's gaze. The alien was watching him, waiting for Carter to break, to plead, to cower. Carter exhaled slowly, his fingers unclenching from the table. He had always believed in diplomacy, in the power of negotiation. But now, sitting across from a creature who had just justified the slaughter of children with the same indifference as one might discuss the weather, he understood a terrible truth. There would be no compromise, no accords, no peace. Carter stood. The chair scraped against the polished floor, the sound sharp in stillness. He smoothed his suit, his movements slow, deliberate. When he spoke, his voice was eerily calm. "You will regret this." Zelver chuckled, low and amused. Human bravado. Charming. He waved a dismissive hand. "Run back to your leaders, Carter. Tell them what you saw. Let them weep over their dead. It changes nothing." Carter didn't respond. He turned, his steps measured as he exited the chamber, his mind already racing ahead. The moment he stepped into the Earth Embassy, a dozen officials swarmed him, their voices urgent, their faces pale with dread. The massacre had already reached Earth. The news networks had seized upon it, playing the footage in endless loops. The world was watching, waiting. President Lorna Hale's face appeared on the hollow display before him. She looked exhausted, her steel gray eyes shadowed by grief, by fury. "You saw it," Yes. The War Council had already begun, military officials filling the embassy's secure chambers. The air crackled with anger, with demands for retaliation. Generals spoke of counterstrikes, of strategic assaults, of punitive measures. They were all thinking within the framework of war as it had always been fought. They didn't understand. Not yet. Carter stepped forward, cutting through the noise. The room fell silent. He had spent his career advocating restraint, tempering war-hungry politicians with diplomacy. But now, his voice carried no trace of hesitation. "This isn't war," he said. "It's extermination." He let the weight of his words settle before continuing. "The Empire didn't strike a military target. They didn't challenge us in battle. They slaughtered children, civilians. They did it because they think we are weak, because they believe we will mourn, but we will not act." He let his gaze sweep the room. Faces hardened, hands clenched into fists. Carter inhaled, his next words coming like a hammer upon steel. "We will not answer with measured strikes. We will not engage in border skirmishes. We will not negotiate." He leaned forward, his voice lowering, commanding. "We will burn their worlds. We will shatter their fleets. We will erase their legacy from the stars." A heavy silence followed. Then the president spoke, her voice steady, resolute. "Total war." Carter met her gaze. "Yes." The room erupted into movement. Orders shouted. Battle plans drafted. Fleets mobilized. The weight of history had shifted in that moment. The course of humanity altered irrevocably. As Carter stood amidst the storm, he felt something cold settle within him. The man who had once sought peace was gone, left behind on a dying colony alongside the bodies of innocent children. Now there was only war. The war room pulsed with urgency, its walls lined with hollow displays flashing strategic data, casualty reports, and live feeds of a world in mourning. The massacre on Haven, for it had ignited a firestorm across Earth and its colonies. Protests filled the streets of every major city, banners demanding retribution. News anchors, voices strained with grief and fury, spoke of war as an inevitability. Across the stars, humanity had awakened to a singular, unifying truth. This was no longer about diplomacy or borders. This was survival. Ambassador Elias Carter stood at the head of the long steel table, his face carved from stone. Around him sat Earth's highest-ranking officials. President Lorna Hale, her sharp gaze unreadable, Admiral Vincent Kwan, commander of the Titan Armada, General Naomi Voss of the Exodus Legions, and Director Aaron Solis of the Strategic Intelligence Bureau. Each of them bore the same look, rage honed into resolve. President Hale broke the silence. "The Empire believes we will hesitate." She tapped the table, and a hologram flickered into view, a map of the Imperial territories, dozens of key installations marked in red. "They expect outrage. They expect sanctions. They do not expect us to strike with full force." Admiral Kwan leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "We've been preparing for this." He gestured, and the display shifted to reveal Earth's hidden military strength. The Titan Armada, a fleet of dreadnought-class warships, each the size of a city, bristling with weapons designed for planetary devastation. The Exodus Legions, cybernetically enhanced super soldiers, their bodies engineered for war, their minds sharpened into precision instruments of destruction. And Project Nemesis, Earth's classified AI-driven war machines, autonomous constructs designed to outthink and outfight any organic enemy. Carter took in the display, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking of Haven, of the boy who had run toward his mother. He saw the moment the plasma bolt struck, saw the tiny hands frozen mid-reach. His fingers curled into a fist. "We will not strike like a wounded animal," he said, voice low but carrying weight. "We will strike like the reckoning they never saw coming." He turned to General Voss. "How soon can the legions be deployed?" "We're already moving," she said. "The moment you give the order, they'll burn the first world within days." Director Solis interjected. "Intelligence has identified vulnerabilities in their supply lines. If we hit them strategically, we can cripple their infrastructure before they even understand what's happening." Carter exhaled, steadying himself. For so long, he had believed in restraint. He had spent years at negotiation tables, convincing leaders that war could be avoided, that peace was always an option. But peace had never been an option. It had been a fragile illusion, one the Empire had shattered with the bodies of human children. He looked at the president. We do not stop until their empire is ash. The word sealed something in the air, a finality that no one questioned. President Hale nodded. Then we begin. The chamber erupted into movement. Orders were transmitted across Earth's military networks. The Titan Armada mobilized, its warships breaking orbit, vanishing into the void with silent promise. The Exodus legions armed themselves, finalizing preparations for ground invasions. Weapons that had never been tested in full-scale war were powered up, waiting for deployment. Carter stood amidst it all, watching the machinery of war awaken. The Empire had made a single fatal mistake. They had taught humanity what it meant to hate. Xander Prime never saw them coming. The Imperial stronghold, a fortress world ringed by orbital defenses, had stood unconquered for centuries. Its skies were thick with battleships, its surface bristling with anti-air batteries and war factories. It was meant to be impenetrable, indomitable, and yet in a single night it burned. The first sign of Earth's arrival was silence. Xander's deep space listening posts, watchful sentinels that had long detected threats before they arrived, blinked offline without so much as an alert. No alarms, no distress calls. Just darkness. Then came the ghosts. Stealth ships, undetectable to Imperial sensors, drifted to the void like shadows, slipping past the fences undisturbed. They carried no weapons, only a payload, cybernetic warfare suites that latched onto the Empire's data grid, whispering to its systems with the cold precision of artificial minds. Within minutes, the planetary defense network turned against itself. Turrets misfired. Shields flickered and died. The orbital command stations, responsible for coordinating fleet movements, found their systems unresponsive. In the space of a breath, Xander Prime was blind, deaf, and vulnerable. Then the sky cracked open. The Titan Armada emerged from the void, descending like judgment. Massive dreadnoughts loomed over the planet, their hulls reflecting the pale light of a dying moon. Their weapons ignited an eerie silence, and then the world was fire. Orbital strikes carved deep scars into the surface, reducing fortifications to molten craters. Entire legions of Imperial troops were incinerated before they could mount a defense. The lucky ones died instantly. The less fortunate were left to face what came next. The Exodus legions deployed. They did not land with the grace of conventional soldiers. They fell like meteors, slamming into the surface in thunderous impacts, their bodies encased in reinforced armor that absorbed the force. As the dust settled, they rose, inhuman in their precision, their cybernetic augmentations turning them into avatars of war. The first Imperial soldiers who encountered them did not have time to scream. Elias Carter watched the battle unfold from the bridge of the Indomitable, his expression unreadable. He had once spoken in this very system, standing before Imperial diplomats, arguing for coexistence. He had once walked to the marble halls of Xander's ruling citadel, drinking wine with the same leaders who now lay dead in the ruins of their palaces. It did not matter. A transmission crackled through. The city is secured, General Naomi Voss reported. Resistance was brief. Brief. That was a polite way of saying it had been a slaughter. Carter turned to Admiral Vincent Kwan. Casualties? Kwan's face was grim. Minimal. We lost a handful of drones. No human deaths. A cold efficiency. No heroics. No desperate last stands. Just a precise, methodical dismantling of an empire that had once believed itself invincible. Carter exhaled. This was only the beginning. Across the empire, news of Xander's fall spread like wildfire. Panic took root where once there had been arrogance. The Empire's citizens had always been told the humans were weak, that their fleets were insignificant, their armies laughable. And yet, here they were, standing over the ruins of a world that had never known conquest. The Empire tried to respond. Fleets were mobilized, garrisons reinforced. But Earth did not fight like the Empire expected. There were no grand declarations, no drawn-out battles of attrition. Instead, Entire planets woke to find their orbital stations compromised, their supply chains shattered, their leaders executed by unseen hands. Cities fell before the first shots were fired. The Empire had always ruled through fear. Now, they were the ones who feared. Carter monitored it all, his hands clasped behind his back as reports flooded in. Every success, every shattered fleet, every conquered world brought the same quiet realization. There was no turning back. He was no longer a diplomat, no longer the man who had once believed in peace. He had become something else, something the Empire had created. The imperial capital, Vale Zir, burned beneath a blood-red sky. What had once been the heart of an empire spanning thousands of star systems, the seat of power that had ruled the galaxy with an iron fist, was now a graveyard of fire and ash. The towering spires of its skyline lay shattered, crumbling as plumes of black smoke curled into the atmosphere. Streets that had once been filled with parades of imperial might were now littered with the wreckage of war. Toppled statues, charred vehicles, bodies sprawled where they had fallen. Elias Carter stood on the balcony of the fallen Senate Hall, watching the end unfold. His reflection flickered against the fractured glass of the war-torn chamber, but he hardly recognized the man staring back at him. The war had carved away the diplomat he once was, stripping him down to something raw, something unrelenting. Below, human soldiers moved through the ruins, securing what remained of the once mighty world. The final battle had not been a battle at all. It had been an execution. The Empire had fought, but it fought like a dying beast, desperate and cornered. Their fleets, once the terror of the stars, had been shattered. Their armies, once invincible, had been dismantled before they could even mount a proper defense. It was over, and yet there was no triumph in the air, no cheers, no celebrations, only the eerie silence of the conquered. Behind him, the sound of shuffling footsteps broke the quiet. Carter turned. Lord Zelver, former Minister of War, knelt before him, his once pristine robes torn and blood-stained. His reptilian features were twisted in pain, golden eyes filled with something Carter had never seen before, fear. "You," Zelver rasped, his voice hoarse from smoke and exhaustion. "You don't understand what you've done." Carter stepped closer, his boots crunching over shattered debris. "Enlighten me." Zelver lifted his head, taking in the devastation around them, the fallen banners, the burning towers. He coughed, blood flecking his lips. The Empire, it was the only thing holding the chaos at bay. His gaze flickered to the ruined cityscape. "You think you've won? You think this is victory?" He let out a hollow, bitter laugh. "You've shattered order. The galaxy will drown in warlords, in anarchy. You've unleashed something far worse than us." Carter studied him, expression unreadable. Once, he might have listened. Once, he might have hesitated. But that man had died alongside the children of Haven 4. He crouched down, meeting Zelver's gaze. "You massacred our people," he said, his voice even, almost gentle. "You thought yourselves gods, unchallenged, eternal." He gestured to the ruins around them. "And now you beg me to believe you were the lesser evil?" Zelver's jaw clenched, but he had no answer. Carter exhaled, standing tall once more. No more empires. No more chains. A single nod. A silent command. A gunshot. Zelver slumped forward, his body joining the millions who had fallen before him. Carter did not watch. He turned back to the city, to the flames licking at the sky. Humanity had won. And now, the real test would begin. The Empire's fall had left a vacuum, one that would not remain empty for long. Across the galaxy, the old order crumbled, and with it came the opportunists, the warlords, the insurgents, the factions rising from the ruins, each hungry to carve out their own dominion. They would come, seeking power, seeking revenge, seeking the throne that now lay vacant. Carter knew what would happen next. He had studied the cycles of history, had seen how civilizations fell and rose anew. The war was not over. It had only changed shape. As he stood amidst the wreckage of what had once been the galaxy's greatest empire, he felt the weight of it settle upon his shoulders. The war for survival had been won, but the war for the future was just beginning.